Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon as we discuss facilitating student success in your online course. As promised to the folks who were jamming to those cool tunes with me, we are going to get started right at 4 o'clock, which is what is showing on my computer. If you haven't been at one of my webinars before, welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Valerie Howe, and I'm a customer success specialist here at D2L. In my former life, before I became a D2Ler, I was an educator. So I taught for 5 years total. 3 of those years were in England, just south of London in Surrey, Guildford area. And then I came back to Canada and taught for 2 years in teaching grade 4, in Northern Alberta before coming home to Ontario. And now I've been with D2L for about 2 years now, and I work with K-12 school districts in using Brightspace to help facilitate online learning, blended learning, all of that sort of stuff. I have put my Twitter handle on the screen. If you're not already giving me a follow, please feel free to do so. I like to post tips and tricks, new releases, and as well as webinars like we're having today. Our agenda for today is kind of divided into 2 parts. The first 30 minutes of this session is going to be a webinar where we chat about some of the ways that Brightspace can help with facilitating student success in your online class, namely our class progress tool and our course overview widget. And then the last 30 minutes or so is going to be office hours where you'll be able to submit your questions through our Q&A box, which I'll just cover in just a moment when we get to our housekeeping items. And then I have another D2Ler on the line with me, Josh, who will be here to support me in helping to answer some of your questions. Okay, so before we get going, there is quite a bit I want to show you today, and I do want to keep it to 30 minutes so that we have lots of time for questions. But as this webinar is open to all of our clients in North America, just for consistency's sake and being all on the same page, you'll hear me using the term district to encompass school boards, divisions, wherever it might be that you work. And for questions, we will be saving all of the questions for the end during our office hours, but please feel free to ask them and throw them in our Q&A pod as we go. And the way that you'll find that is when you're in your Zoom window, if you scroll your cursor to the bottom of the screen, a menu will appear and there will be a Q&A option. And if you click that, you should be able to type your question into that chat pod, and then we'll answer those questions during our office hours portion. That will be starting approximately around 4:30. And then as always, we always post the webinar recording and our slide deck on the education webinar site, which is where you would have registered for this webinar. So we usually, we need a few days to get it up there, but at some point next week, you'll be able to head to that website and you'll be able to access this recording as well as the slide deck that I'm using today. I'm going to be linking resources throughout, so please feel free to go access that slide deck later if you want to use some of those resources. All right, and before we get into the main portion of today, which will be a demo of the class progress tool and then a quick overview of our course overview widget, I just wanted to briefly chat about the idea of facilitating student success. As I mentioned in my introduction, I do come from an education background and taught for 5 years. So I did just want to head this off by saying, you know, there are many, many components to facilitating the success of your students. And I've listed some examples, and I might add in no particular order, but I think we all know as educators that this is no means an exhaustive list in any way. There are so many avenues we can take to help our students in being successful in our course, whether it be a fully online course, a blended course, or a face-to-face course where we're just using a little bit of this technology to kind of aid as we go. And I know that many of you on the line, some of you might be teaching summer school right now online. Maybe it's a purely online setting. Some of you might be joining us to see how this could help you for the fall. So just keeping that in mind, Brightspace is, a very powerful tool. And if you've been using Brightspace, then you'll know this online, classroom space provides you a very robust toolkit that can help you with teaching and learning. And there are lots of different ways that Brightspace can help you with some of the items on the screen here. So for example, we have different tools that we won't be covering today, but that could help with the assessment and feedback portion. We have other tools that could help with student engagement and voice and teaching and learning materials and differentiation and so forth. But what we'll be talking about today more so is through using those various tools in the system, the information that it's collecting gets rolled up into a class progress tool, which is a really great area to have a bird's eye view of how your students are progressing in your course. And there are many, many progress indicators captured in the class progress tool. And what I personally think, when I think about my teaching experience, that's really great about this is it can really help not only have that bird's eye view of how your class and your students are doing in a really kind of easy and visual area, but it can really help inform your decisions for learning conversations that you might have with your students, or conversations that you might even have with parents and guardians. So it can be a really great resource in looking at how your students are doing and what the next steps might be to either continue challenging them or what you might need to do to help facilitate their success in that course. So I'm going to head into a live environment in a moment to give you a demo. I think that's the best way for us to figure this out together. And my learning objectives for you today are, we're going to talk about where can you find the class progress tool. I want you to walk away knowing what kind of progress indicators are captured within that tool to be able to use those progress indicators to facilitate learning conversations and student success. And I'm also going to show you how you can customize the class progress tool so that you can be pulling up that data, those metrics, that information that you need for you and your students. And then we will talk about the course overview widget. I've kind of put a little asterisk there because while everyone should have access to the class progress tool, not all districts will make the course overview widget available. So we'll definitely go over it. I'll show you how it's useful. And then that's something where if you have that in your district, wonderful, it's certainly a tool I should say a widget that you can use. And if not, that could be a conversation that you have with your Brightspace administrator about if you have access to that and how you can get access to that if you would find it useful. But the class progress tool feeds information into that course overview widget. So if that's not an option for you, don't worry, you're still going to have more than enough information to kind of arm you with helping facilitate student success in your course. And just one last thing before I head into this live environment, I just want to show you a quick example of class progress and what it could look like as your course goes on. The environment I'm going to show you today is mimicking a little bit more towards the start of your course where maybe you're just kind of starting out, you don't have a ton of kind of student work and stuff in there yet. I want you to kind of see what it will look like as you first get started on this journey. But I did also want to give you an example of what it can look like as you progress through this course and this idea of having this interactive data that you can engage with from a bird's eye view. And as you see on my screen, we have kind of all of that information with all of my students pooled in one place, and you can see that clearly they're a little bit further along in this course. They have multiple assignments, they have multiple grades to be playing around with. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's head into my environment. Okay, so I'm in my Brightspace classroom here, and as you can see, I've landed on my course homepage. So the first thing that we are going to cover is, where does the class progress tool live? How can I be using this? And you can find it in one of two ways. So for some of you, it might be right up here on your navigation bar. If it's not on your nav bar and you want to add it to your nav bar, you can just simply come and edit your nav bar and it will be in the list of system icons for you to add. If you don't want it to be on your nav bar, that's not a problem. You'll also be able to find it in your course admin. So if I head to my course admin, which again is that where I can find all of the tools, all of the resources that I have, something that just you can see, your students can't see this. And in some districts, it's also called Edit Course, just in case it's named different in your environment and that threw you off a little bit. So either course admin or edit course. And you can see here that under learner management, I have my class progress option. And so I could click into it from here, but I can also just click into it from my nav bar. So now you can see that we're in my class progress, and as promised, this is a little bit more bare. You can see that maybe this is towards the beginning of a course that I'm doing. And this is the main kind of class progress page. This is what you will first land on, where I can see all of my learners. You can see I have a bit of a small class here. And I can see some high level metrics and indicators here. So I can see all of the students in my class. If I want to engage with those students from here, I can do that. I'll show you that in just a little bit. I can also filter my users here. So for example, maybe I've kind of taken a scan of my whole class, but I'm really particularly interested in a group that I've made or a particular section of students. I can come in here, you can see I have some groups already made. But if I want to come and see how my reading group A is doing, I could click on that filter, and now you can see that I'm only seeing the 2 students in that group, and I can see, oh, Alpha is doing is really kind of breezing along and seems to be really engaged and interactive in interacting with the course. But Lenny here, he hasn't logged in. He does seem to have a grade. Maybe it was something that wasn't submitted in Brightspace. It was something I marked and entered in my grade book. But I can see that maybe I need to have a learning conversation with Lenny, and I need to see how he's doing and if he's having any barriers or problems kind of accessing the course and getting started. I'm going to head back now to all users. And I want to talk about these 4 progress indicators that you see here. So this is an example of what you can see. You'll always show 4 at one time, but you can choose which 4 show. So for example, I have content completed here, and you can see it's interactive. If I put my cursor over it, there is some additional information that I can get. So maybe this course started recently, which is why he hadn't been logging in previously, and I can now see that wow, he logged in 5 times in one day. Maybe that makes sense given what the course is or some activities that I had them do, or just some information for me to have at my hands. Discussions is another option here for a progress indicator. I can see how many discussion posts that he or she has read, how many threads in discussion that they've created, how many times they've replied. And then here I can see a chronological view of their grades. And if I am rolling my cursor over that, then I can get some more information about what that topic was, what the grade that they got was. And so again, that can be a really nice indicator in itself to see most recent, most consistent, how are the students faring, being able to kind of see this in line with other students at the same time. Are all of the students kind of trending upwards or getting on okay? Are there a couple students that seem to be not progressing as well that I need to reach out with? Or is it a larger a thing as a whole where maybe I can see maybe some tasks weren't quite understood and that reflected, and then I know I need to go back and I need to re-explain, and maybe we need to try that again. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, okay, this is great, but some of these progress indicators, they don't really speak to me. I don't tend to use discussions in my class, so that's just gonna always kind of be 0 and not really resonate for me. And the great thing about this is that if you come up to settings, You can personalize this to fit your needs. So you can see here I have some options, and let's go to discussion. So again, maybe that was one where I'm not going to use that. It will also give you a summary of what that progress indicator says and an example of what it could look like. But I can come and click the down arrow of whichever item I want to replace. Click replace, and then you can see it's going to give me a number of options here of what I want to replace it with. So maybe we use quizzes quite a bit in this course. That's something that would resonate better. Or I want the assignments performance summary. I'm going to click that and put it in. And then if I wanted this to show differently, so number one, it will be that most left-hand column, and 4 will be that most right-hand column. So I can keep that in mind and decide how I want this to display on my screen. So I'm gonna move that up, and then I'm gonna go ahead and give that a save and a close. And now you can see the discussions progress indicator is gone and the assignments has come. And one thing that you might be thinking, okay, assignments and grades. Something that's great to point out here is that grades can be something that's independent of your assignment. You might have some formative assessments that you've graded and given feedback on here that wouldn't necessarily show in your grade book towards their final grade. So this could be a nice way to see, hey, how have they been going on all the activities and assignments that I've been giving them throughout the course versus what's happening with those grade book items that are counting potentially towards their final grade. One last thing too, if you have a bit of a lengthy list and you don't really want to filter by a group, you're just looking for one student in particular, you do also have this option up here to be searching. And we won't get into this today, but there is also this option to be using in what we call an intelligent agent to automate feedback. So for example, if I'm looking here and I'm seeing, you know, I have 2 students who seem to be really, you know, gaining speed and starting this course on a really successful note, and I'm really happy to see that. But I have a couple who aren't, they're not really engaging in the material. Maybe they're not really logging in anymore. I can set up something called an intelligent agent, and I can set up rules, for example, that might say, okay, if they haven't logged in 5 or 7 days, please send an email suggesting that he or she logs into the course. And I have put a link to an intelligence agent video in the slide deck, so please feel free to check that out if that's something that you're interested in. Now, this is a really great bird's eye view for my entire class, but we can even get more granular in the progress indicators when I click into a particular student. So I'm going to click into Alpha. And when I come in here, you'll see a few different things here. So I have the student information here. And I said a few moments ago that there is a way to communicate via this. So if there's something here and I'm thinking, oh, you know, I should really chat with him or her about this, I want to send an email or send an instant message if that's something that your district is utilizing, excuse me, then this is a really easy way to do that without having to head into the class list or a different area of the site. And then this is where I get a more detailed progress summary for this student. And I have a different table of contents here. I can either scroll down and kind of look through, or I can click in through this table of contents, as you can see. And before we go any further, when you log in to this and you go into a student, you might have all of the progress indicators turned on by default. And you might be thinking, whoa, there's so much information here, which is wonderful, but it's a bit overwhelming. Students can see this view as well. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But you do have the option here to come up to settings and customize this. And the beauty about this is if it will work for all the students, it's not something you have to go and do for each student. But you can see here, that I can come and choose the progress indicators that I want students to see. So if we don't, maybe I don't want them to see the login history, I can do that. Maybe we don't really make use of discussions, I can come and turn that off, and I can really personalize that to show the progress indicators that are going to match with how I'm facilitating this course. And then I would just go ahead and give a save and a close. There are a couple other options down here as well. You may have noticed that there's some color coding in the site. This is where I can come and personalize that. So you can see here I have it set that some concerns would be if it's 60% and above, on track would be 70% and above. But again, that's totally customizable. And then there are some options here of how you want information to display to your students. So for example, do you want them to see a grade distribution of how kind of everyone did, which isn't as common as an option in K-12, but definitely an option for you. And do you want to display a potential final grade range as a minimum and a maximum? But this is what we find is more common, educators coming in and choosing what progress indicators resonate based on how I'm making use of the tools in the course. So again, if I go ahead and just save that, and you can see here at the top, I have some breadcrumbs. So maybe I want to get back to that first page where all of the progress indicators were laid out. So I can give it a bit more of a scan. I would just click that breadcrumb trail backwards to the student name. And now you can see I've come back to this progress summary page. And these are some of the progress summaries that I have. I'm not going to go into detail about necessarily all of them. It's something I would explore you to come in, but you can see some of the examples I'll cover. You can see how this can be really, really powerful for facilitating student success in your course. So for example, if you have standards or outcomes or curriculum expectations that you've been pulling into your course and you've been assessing against those curriculum expectations, this is an area where you would be able to come in and you could see how that student is faring against those expectations based on how you've been leveling and how you've been grading them in the system. You can even get a bit more granular to see a trend over time. Again, if we're thinking most recent, most consistent, I can come and see the feedback, see the evidence that was left. And again, your students can see this as well. This is something that they'll be able to access. So it can also be really great in being transparent and having those learning conversations with your students. If you're having, if we think about the circumstances at the moment, if you're having a virtual conversation with students, you could have them following along on their screen, or you could have this pulled up on your screen as well, and you could be screen sharing and chatting with them through it. Another really powerful indicator, I think, of being able to facilitate student success in your course is this content area. So we can see here that again, I had said it's towards the beginning of the course. So there's 9 content items I've made available. This particular student has seen 8. I can see how many times in total they've been logging in and accessing the content. And I can also see the time spent. So I can see that they've come in, they've done some things, but I can also drill down more to see which content items they are visiting and how much time they're spending on it. So for example, with my unit, my food for thought unit here, I can see that the student has visited 7 times, but they've only spent 5 minutes or so total. I can also see that the last time they came in was yesterday at around 4:30. So again, depending on how I've set up my course, that might make a lot of sense. Maybe it was a really quick read. Maybe it was a longer piece of information, and that signals that maybe they're having some difficulty, or maybe they're flying through it and they need to be challenged a little bit more. And then I can see, for example, I have a dinosaur measurement game here, and I can see that this particular student has spent 33 minutes in it. So great, they're clearly enjoying it, and they're clearly doing well. So maybe that's also something in terms of building that relationship with my students online. I can kind of be chatting with and seeing how they're liking that. And maybe that will give me an indicator of that being a useful resource for them or something that they really engaged with. And I might think about including more resources like that in my course. And then I'm going to just hop over discussions here, and I'm going to come down to assignments. This is a question that I find comes up quite a bit, particularly when people are new to using Brightspace and wanting to see, without having to go into your assignments folder or your Dropbox folder, if that's what it's called in your district, wanting that bird's eye view of, how many assignments has a student submitted? How are they doing? Is there anything that's left to hand in? And if so, what is it? So when we come here, and same thing for your students, that's a common question with students. What do I have left to submit? How am I doing? How can I kind of like easily see that all in one space? So if I come into here and I click on assignments, it's going to take me into a more detailed view. So again, I can come over here and I get that interactive piece. I can see how many assignment submissions that there have been, how many late submissions, in case maybe that's something I need to chat with them. Maybe they're having a hard time with time management or they're having difficulties, something to just be aware of and kind of facilitating how they're doing in the course. And I can also see, and the student can see easily if there's anything that's awaiting a grade. And then I can come down here and I can see that they've submitted this assignment. I can see it was a file submission, but here I can see they haven't submitted anything because it's still telling me that they have the option to do an unlimited amount of submissions. And so again, this can be really great. If I've attached a grade to that, if I've marked it, if it wasn't just a formative assessment or I gave it an actual numeric grade instead of written or verbal feedback, let's say, that would also show to keep it a nice, easy tracking place for students. And then as I mentioned before, you can also toggle back and forth between students. So if I'm thinking, okay, Alpha's doing really well, I'm happy that I was able to kind of come in and see this more detailed information. Now I'm wondering how Beta is doing or Beta is doing. I can just really easily toggle to that next student, and then I can go through the same kind of process. Maybe I want to come back just one step and see her progress summary page. I can really easily do that. The last thing that I will call out here, I know when we think of computers and online, we think of less paper and being a bit green, but I do just want to call out that there is this option to print some of this information. And this could be useful if maybe you're preparing for a parent-teacher night or something that you want to be accessible to someone who's not in the system. I know some districts have filing that they need to do, so on and so forth. So this is something where you can come in, you can look, and you can control what gets printed and how it looks. So if I'm in that print preview and I come to settings, I just give that a click. And then you can see I'm going to get a lot more options here. So do I want our kind of district branding to be on there? Do I want the last 7 days, the last month? Do I want it to be the timeline of the whole course? And then you can see I have an option of what components to display. So do I want their grades to show? Do I want it to be a summary? Or do I want to show all the details? And then I would save and close, and then I would be able to give that a print. So again, just depending on kind of preference and how people also like to track that. Or again, if you have any kind of filing requirements that you need for your district, that's an option as well. So before we head into the another option for course overview widget, again, I really encourage you to come in and kind of play around with this, especially if you're teaching a course right now, or maybe again, you're just kind of prepping for fall and you want to know what's out there. This is a super powerful tool for giving you that bird's eye view and being able to have not only learning conversations, but even just information for yourself and getting some feedback, because of course, I always recommend that people are reaching out to their students and getting some of their voice and some of their feedback and how they're engaging with the course. But this can also be a really great way to see how things are resonating with students, what they seem to be engaging with, assignments that maybe one student needs help with, or maybe it's an assignment that everyone kind of could use a bit more help with. I need to revisit that topic. So that's a class progress tool. I know we are at 4:30 and we're going to have some people coming in for office hours, but I do just want to flip quickly into showing this other course. So this other widget, excuse me. So I had mentioned at the beginning that some folks on the line, you might not have access to this course overview widget. You could always reach out to your Brightspace administrator to see if you do. And a lot of the information from here, it's pulling, I believe, from class progress, and it's kind of serving it up in a different visual way. But if you have access to this, this could also be a really useful way for keeping an eye on student progress and how your students are faring in your course. So you can see here, I can see a trend of how many people have been coming and visiting. So I can see that there's been a pretty steady flow of people coming into my course. It will also give me a written confirmation here. Something to just keep in mind about this though is that it's not necessarily just going to be showing students, it's going to be showing how many people in total have accessed your course. So while only people who have been enrolled in your course can access your course, some districts have principals, or particularly if it's summer school, they might have summer school coordinators or principals who have access to your course. So just that they'll show up in this as well. But I'll show you where you can kind of change that if you just want to see how many students have access that day. So the first thing we'll come into is class engagement here. And again, this will look very similar to class progress. You can see I will see my students' current grade, when they've last visited. So I can see some people haven't been in for a long time, some people came in earlier today, and I have discussion information. But what I really like about this class engagement view is I have really easy ways to filter some key information. So if I want to see, okay, I know 5 students have not accessed this course in a week, to me that, that's signaling an issue. I need to know who those students are pronto so I can go have a conversation with them. I can just click on that and you can see that now it has filtered to show me those students. I can also filter by grade distribution. So you can see I have some bars here to show me students who are in that percentage range that I identified as being a bit problematic and the students who are faring well. So again, I can come and click and I can filter on that. And I can combine these filters too. So if I'm thinking, this is problematic, is this student also someone who hasn't come in 5 days? I can see that he matches both of those filtering criteria. So I know, I really do need to go have a conversation with Stanley. I'm getting a bit worried about him. If I come back to my course homepage, next up is the course access. So this is where I can come and find more detailed information about the different people who have been accessing this course, and I can see a greater timeline. So by default on the widget on the course homepage, it's just going to show you those past 7 days, but this is where I can come and I can get a different view of different time frames. So maybe I think this looks good, but I want to come and see what it was like earlier in my course. I can click and drag to the time that I want, and I can do that. I can see how many events happened. So I can see there were 42 access events that occurred during this period. And I can also export this to an XLS, or to CSV if I need that. Maybe I need to plug this into another program, or I just want it for my files, I can do that. If I don't want to do the click and drag, that's totally okay. I can come and punch in some dates if that's more what you're after. And then this is where I can also come and determine my roles. So like I said, it is going to show everyone, but I could really easily come and unclick that and then click into my students and get a sense of how that's going. And then the last thing for course overview that I'll show is, again, this will depend on if your district has given you permission to see this, but you might also be able to see the tool access component of the course overview widget. And this is, I think, pretty neat just to get a sense of the tools that your students seem to be engaging with the most, which, you know, is obviously going to be a mix of the types of activities and materials and resources that you're making available to them. But it's really interesting to come in and just see a bit of a breakdown, and we have the legend down here, of not only how often it's being used, but what are the total views. So I can see, you know, content that's clearly been you know, something that my students really go to. They access it quite a lot. That's something I need to keep doing. But then I could also see maybe there are some areas where maybe there's a bit of room for doing some more quizzes to change that up, or doing some more discussions just to keep things, you know, a little bit more variety and spice of life, and figuring out what works best for my students to really ensure that they're engaging with the material and the resources and activities, that they're happy, and that they're being successful in my course. I'm going to flip back to my PowerPoint really quickly here. And I do just want to say that in the slide deck, I have just made a couple information pages available about this. So maybe you don't have time to go back and watch the full webinar, but you just want to know what one thing is. I have kind of put some resource slides in here for you. We've covered all of our learning objectives today. We talked about what the class progress tool is, the different progress indicators that are captured, ways that we might want to use this to facilitate learning conversations or the success of our students in our course, how we can customize that to show the information that's most relevant to us and our students. And we did that quick overview of the course overview widget. If you're thinking about how you can get started or how you want to prepare for your class in August or September, wherever you live and wherever your next school year might be starting, then I encourage you, when your course is available, to head into the class progress tool and start kind of customizing the experience to think about and show what progress indicators you think will work best for you and your students. And just remember that you can change this whenever you'd like. So if you added in a progress indicator and maybe you didn't end up using that as much as you thought, or it's not as useful for that particular class, then feel free to go in and swap that out and find what works best for you and your students. In this slide deck, I've also linked a bunch of resources here for you, including a D2L parent and guardian support site that might be helpful for you, Brightspace tutorials, a link to our education webinar page, and just some different resources. And again, if you haven't joined some of our webinars in the past, or maybe there are a couple that you've missed, in the slide deck, I'll also link to some of our past educator webinars that we've done. So if any of these topics appeal to you, feel free to go check them out, as well as lots and lots and lots of resources. I'm a big fan of providing resources that are divided into more pedagogical areas. So if feedback and assessment is something that you're looking for different ideas of what you could be doing in Brightspace, anything that's underlined is hyperlinked with a tutorial video to just help get you going or give you some new ideas. And last but not least, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking some time out to come learn a little bit more about how Brightspace can be helping you facilitate student success, the success of your students in your course. And that ends the webinar portion of our time today. Please feel free to stick around for office hours and put some questions in the Q&A pod. But otherwise, feel free to sign off if you don't have any other questions. And thanks again for joining. And if you are going to stick around here for office hours with us today, as I mentioned towards the beginning, I'm sticking around to help you here with office hours, and we also have Josh from D2L. And if you are just coming in for the office hours portion, thanks for joining us today. We are asking if you have any questions to please submit them into the Q&A pod. Again, if you move your cursor to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click the Q&A icon, you'll be able to submit questions there, and we will live answer or provide some advice. And I did see a question that had more so to do with, it might have been logging in and getting started. So if you joined the webinar and you were missing a little bit more of that getting started piece, or learning a little bit more about the tools and the resources that we have available in Brightspace, I'm just going to back up a few slides here. So again, if you head to our educator webinar site, you'll be able to see we've been doing a lot of webinars since about March, particularly to help with that school closure period that we all had. So we have lots of information about getting started with Brightspace. We have information and webinars, webinar recordings and slide decks about an introduction to accessibility, assessment, delivering learning online, different ways that you can connect and engage with your students, video options, so on and so forth. So feel free to head there. Okay, so we have a question, I can't see my classes. So for that question, I would potentially reach out to your Brightspace administrator, because it could be a couple things. It could be that they haven't made your courses for the upcoming school year yet. Some districts don't tend to do that until closer to the start date, and they should be able to help you out with that. Or it could be, I'm pretty confident that that might be it, but again, you could reach out to your Brightspace administrator and they'll be able to help you with that. And this great question, will the slide deck be sent to your emails? It's not going to be sent to your emails, but the slide deck will be available on that educator webinar site that you registered at. And it will have a link, or you click on watch this recording and the recording will pop up, and then there will also be a link that says access this slide deck, and it will be there for you to use as well. Great question. Will students be able to see their own assessment information as shown in today's webinar, even if we have disabled the grades view for students? So yes, if you have not made grades available for your students, or you've hidden the grades, it will not show there. However, they will be able to see it in the assignments area. So if you've marked something in the assignments area, they'll be able to see it there. If you've only provided verbal or written feedback in the assignments area, and you're keeping your grading information in your grades book and you've kept that hidden, they shouldn't be able to see that. Josh can keep me honest on that one.
Yeah, that's right. You really have full control over what students see there. So they may be able to see the full catalog of activities and content and learning experiences that are in your course. You control whether or not they see the grades or the feedback based on if you've released those items to them or entered that feedback in for them to see.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Yes, that where you would access the recordings in the slide deck is the same as what is shown on the screen here. So www.d2l.com/K12/educator-webinars. And again, you'll be able to go and see the whole gamut of all of the webinars that we've offered. So if anything else catches your eye, we do have some earlier webinars that broke it down more into elementary and secondary. So for example, we have Getting Started for Elementary Educators, an introduction to assessment, delivering learning online, feedback, providing rich and detailed feedback broken into elementary and secondary. So if that's something that particularly resonates with you, wanting to see something a little bit more tailored towards your teaching division, then you would just need to scroll down towards the bottom of those pages, because that's what we did. We did those towards the beginning of the school closure period to help get people started as they were new to the online space. Okay, another really great question here. As a grade 1 to 2 teacher, which 3 or 4 settings would you recommend for starting in the fall? Content, assignments, but anything else? Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I'm just gonna head back into my environment quickly for that one and head up to our settings so that we can see all the options. Perfect. So I do agree. I think content would be a really good one, and so would the assignments one. Sorry, some of them aren't in here because I already have them selected. It doesn't want me to try and be selecting ones I already have. It's showing me what's left here. So content assignments, I totally think are great, and I agree with that. Some other ones, when I think about elementary and those younger grades, I know sometimes quizzes can be quite useful. It might sound a bit strange, but I have seen earlier year grades having success with that, having a quick quiz or kind of an exit ticket type task and posting that at the homepage. So if that's something that you want to make use of, that might be a good one to have in there. I also know quite a few elementary educators make use of our checklist tool to help keep students on track with the tasks that they need to do for that week. So that might be another one to think about using as well.
Yeah,
I hope
I'll add
that
on to that
answers. Oh,
a
yes.
little bit. One really interesting thing about the quiz performance and the assignment performance one is, especially with the quiz one, if you are looking to use, quizzes for self-assessment and exploration for the learners and not have them included in grades, the quiz one really helps you with that area as well. So if you've got some quizzes that are formative and used as self-assessments in the quiz tool, but not linked to the grade book, then using the quiz one will really let you see those things. Whereas the grade one really focuses on actual graded activities that are being written to the grade book as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. That's a great point. And the one last thing that I'll kind of say is a little tip from me, I guess, is I have had questions in the past of educators who find the login really valuable, but there might be another indicator that they want front and center on that screen. Just a reminder that that login history is also captured in quite a bit of detail as well on that individual student progress summary page. So sometimes it is a matter of thinking about what you want to kind of prioritize on that page. So that might be something too. But again, thinking about the younger learners, the login might be helpful as well to be able to get that really quick bird's eye view of, are all of my students logging on consistently? Is one student maybe having a problem, particularly at the start of your course? Knock on wood, I hate to say it, but if we are potentially back in an online environment in the fall, or even if we're in a hybrid environment, having that log on in that first page to start could be really handy until you know that everyone's able to log on consistently and is able to access without any issues. Because for some families, it just might take a little bit of practice. So really good question. Josh, I might throw this to you. The question is, where does the portfolio option fit in?
So portfolio doesn't fit into the class progress area. So it's more of a tool that's used to communicate with students and parents, and it is as an assessment tool as well, so that you can use that for, it's really helpful in lower grades for, or the younger grades for younger learners to, take photographs or videos or record audio for some of their activities, and share that excitement and learning with their peers or their teacher. So the places that it would fit in under class progress would most likely be grades. So if you do have something that's in portfolio that is graded, it would show up there. Likewise, assignments are often an activity that shows up in portfolio as well. So if you do have an assignment that is connected to portfolio, then using the assignment category in class progress could be a way for some of your portfolio activities to show up as well.
Awesome, thanks, Josh. You are very welcome. Awesome. All right, we have about 9 minutes left together, so feel free to keep these questions coming in. This is wonderful. Okay, so if you're having some trouble seeing courses, we have a question about not being able to see a sandbox. Again, having a sandbox is something that sometimes districts will choose to set up so that you have a space to play around with, just for anyone else on the line who's wondering what that is. So if your district has decided to make a sandbox for you to be able to play around in, I would contact them to see why you're not able to access that. Could be that they've kind of turned it off right now. I know some districts close some of the courses over the summer until they're ready to start up. Some leave it open. It is really just kind of a district or school board practice. Awesome, okay. Okay. Okay, I see you're okay, so you're teaching summer school, and that's probably important. Letitia, would it be okay if I should be able to find the email that you used to register? Is it okay if I reach out to you privately after so that we can take that offline and try and get it sorted? Perfect. Okay, I'll reach out to you soon, and we'll see if we can get to the bottom of that. Awesome. Okay, are Google Files compatible with D2L? Yes, is the short answer. In what way do you mean? The kind of quick overview is that you are able to load things from your Google Drive in many various areas of the environment. So for example, on content, you can be linking resources right from your Google Drive. For assignments, in discussions, activity feed, announcements. I'm probably missing a bunch, and Josh can jump in, but they will come in. In some of those instances, depending on how you bring them in, they will be pulled in as a PDF. Depending on what you're looking to do with that and how you pull them in, they might also not be pulled in as a PDF.
I don't have anything to add to that. That's all correct.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
We also do support them in or in Portfolio as well. So
Oh, I knew I was
uh,
going to miss one.
learners that do want to, they have some document from their drive that they want to submit as a portfolio, evidence of learning in their portfolio, that's supported as well.
Awesome. So just to kind of touch on that. So again, if I head into content here as one example, so again, if you haven't been using the content tool, I like to think of this as kind of your teacher binder, if you will. It's where you would come and put your units and your learning materials and resources for students to use. So if I wanted to come and add, you can see this is set up more of an elementary example, but you could imagine if this was a secondary school course, I might have unit titles here instead. So if I want to come and add something under the social studies unit, for example, I think actually this is an example of something that's been brought in, but I can come into my add existing option, and you can see that it's actually the first option here is that this is one way I could be accessing items from my Google Drive or my OneDrive. And again, this exists in lots of different areas in the platform. So if I'm in assignments, I can add it in as a quick link. If I'm on my home page and I'm making use of the activity feed to share resources and announcements or get a little bit of engagement going on with my students, I can also come in and add it there. Sorry, I think I'm fighting my partner right now a little bit for the Wi-Fi. But if I come and I click that blue plus button to make a message, and I come down to my attachment option, you can see that I have the options here to access different resources, and I can come and attach from my Google Drive or my OneDrive.
Then keep in mind if it's the first time that you're doing that thing, one of those, attaching a Google Drive or a OneDrive file from Office 365, if that's something you use, you will go through the experience that you're used to with Google, where you have to sign in and approve Brightspace to kind of connect to your Google account. So don't be shocked if you see that. That's a normal expected thing. We always want to make sure that we're following those best practices when reaching out to other systems like Google and Microsoft, to make sure that you approve that we're okay to integrate with your account.
Awesome, thank you, Josh. That's a great point. So I see. Okay, perfect. Yeah, and that's something common that I'm hearing a lot of. Sorry, I'm just looking at the question or the added comment that Diane added here. I'm hearing lots of educators who maybe they were using Google Classroom, or they were using a mix of Google Classroom and Brightspace, and now they're moving more towards that Brightspace environment, using that as a starting point, but wanting to still bring in those different resources, those materials, to kind of have the best of both worlds. So yes, you can totally do that. We see that a lot. And if I, just more to Josh's point, I don't actually know if we're going to see it in this demo environment. We might, but this is an example of what it might look like when you log into your district homepage. And a lot of districts, if they're Google boards in particular, they might, do I have it? Let's see. Lots of people making little demos. No, I don't have it, but you would have, very anticlimactic there, my apologies, but you might have a widget on your district homepage that says something like Google Apps or Google integration, and you and your students would just come and sync up your account that first time. Like Josh said, there's going to be an announcement or a little, do you give us permission to access these files, which just means, can we have that bridge so that you're pulling in the files that you want? D2L can't actually see them or do anything with them. It's just so that we don't have to ask permission every single time you want to pull something in. And then you and your students do that from the beginning, and then both you and your students can be pulling in things from Google, from your Google Drive. Okay, really great question here. At the present time, can I create and save a general rubric and save it for fall teaching? So yes, you can technically do that. Something that I see some teachers doing, so we had the question before about a sandbox with some districts providing educators with a sandbox so they can play around. Because not all districts do that, some educators, particularly if they've been teaching with their district for a few years, because Brightspace is connected to your student information system, you might have some courses that were made for you in the past, even if you didn't use them. Some educators will pick one of those courses and kind of play around in that so they can try new things. And you could totally go build a rubric in there. And then this is a little bit of a, we'll call it a Brightspace hack or a Brightspace tip or trick, if you will. What you would then do is that in your course admin area, you have an option, it's called import export copy components, which it sounds a bit scary, but it's not. So if we head in here, you do have the ability to copy components from another org unit just needing class. So what you could do is you could search for that course that you had in the past, and then you could pick which components you want to carry over. So you come up here and you would search for your course. I'm just going to do a random search for now. So maybe I was teaching grade 2. And then you can see here, I can come and see if I want to copy everything, if I copy all components, if I want to import some components, and then it's going to give me, oops, wrong one, sorry. Go back up here. That's if I want to do a whole course. I would do here. Have to go back and do my course because I accidentally clicked out of that. Try this again. Sorry, and then I would come down here and select components. So if I want to copy everything, again, this is one of the really great things about Brightspace is once you've been building things in here, you don't have to start from scratch every year. So if I taught grade 9 English 3 years ago, and I know I have a lot of valuable resources in there that I want to be bringing over, I can go and find that old course. And you can see here that I can come and I can select everything, or I could come and pick exactly what I want. So to your question, there is an option to be doing rubrics. So I could create that rubric and I could pull it in. So I hope that answers your question. If you need a little bit more help on that, we do have some videos, or again, your Brightspace administrator will be able to help you out with that. But it's pretty easy to do. It's just a matter of doing it the first time so that you know the steps to take. And then I know lots of teachers or educators who really like this feature of Brightspace because it allows them to be carrying over materials and resources that they like, and they don't have to start from scratch, or they don't have to spend a bunch of time at the beginning of the year uploading a bunch of files. Awesome. Okay, I'm glad that helped.
And with regards to rubrics as well, over the last year or so, maybe year and a half, we've been investing a lot in improving rubrics, and totally biased, I think it's pretty awesome now.
Oh, I love our rubric tool.
And so I'd encourage you, yeah, take a look, spend some time in there, and feel free to share your feedback. You know, all that constructive feedback helps us a lot. So I really like our new rubrics tool, and it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I won't, I'll save you all the time. I won't completely fangirl over it right now, but when I started working at D2L, that was the improvements that have happened to that have really impressed me, and it just made me think about how much time, paper, sore wrists it would have saved me in using that with my students, and not only it being really easy to use, but also just the fact that I didn't have to worry about those, I wouldn't have had to, worry about those rubrics getting lost with my students. They're in the system. So even if I sent home a paper copy, if they lose it, if it gets destroyed in the backpack, maybe, you know, juice or applesauce gets spilt on it, it's okay because it's in Brightspace and they can go and access it whenever they want. Okay, we are just a little bit over time, which is, I don't mind. I do just want to see if there's any last minute questions coming in, but otherwise we will end this session and keep your eyes peeled on the educator webinar site, as well as, again, if you want to follow me on Twitter. I'll just back up once to my thank you page, because I will tweet about upcoming sessions that we'll be having. And this is a format that we're going to be continuing for the next little bit, having a quick webinar and then followed by some office hours. So feel free to join us in the future, or tell any of your educator friends who are maybe looking to learn a little bit more or wanted to ask some questions about Brightspace. You are very welcome, Diane. Wonderful. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so have a fantastic day, and hope to see you all again soon.
Bye, everyone.